Yeah, back at you. We got your boy Quan John and Miss Portia Mystique. Say what's up, Portia.
Hi.
Yes, my friends, back at you with Motivational Motives, where we speak to inspirational Black people who've overcome adversity en route to prosperity. And we have a very, very special guest today. We have Professor Darnell Moorhead Olufade, Professor of Africana Studies at the University of Bridgeport and co-author of Eagle Eye, the original man in America. Say hi, Professor. How are you?
Fine, I'm very fine. Thank you so much for that introduction. It's quite an interesting factor, that book, when we start to study it and talk about it later on.
Sure.
Yes, I'm an adjunct professor at the University of Bridgeport in Bridgeport, Connecticut. I've been teaching as an adjunct since 2014. And I teach both parts of African American history, meaning African American history to 1877 and then 20th century African American history.
Okay. Okay. So let's basically tell the viewers what led you to this passion for African studies and what led you to your career as a professor. You know, how did you get to where you are today as a professor?
Well, where I've gotten today as a professor is quite fascinating. My alma mater is Arizona State University, and I graduated with my degree in history, American Studies, in 1999 from ASU.
Right.
And before I even started to more or less get control of the fact that I had the degree, a friend of mine, she was already teaching African American literature and African American history at Glendale Community College as part-time. So she wanted to come out of her contract, and she couldn't come out of it unless she found somebody to take over that course.
Right.
So she told the dean at Glendale Community College in Arizona, she said to him, "I know the perfect person." And he said, "Really?" And she said, "Yeah, I'm going to send her over to you." And I went and met with the assistant dean, and they sat down and asked me a few questions.
Right.
And they said, "Why do you think you can teach this course?" And I said, "Because of the fact that I was born in America, so I'm an African American, and partially educated. I was born in New York. Went to school in New York and Los Angeles, California. Went to high school in Jamaica, West Indies, in Kingston, and actually married an African and lived in Nigeria for 12 years and England for 6. And the both of them looked at me like, "Good Lord. Oh, okay. So can you start in August?" And I'm like, "Well, I don't know for sure, because I haven't completed my master's program until, December."
Right, right.
And they said to me, "Oh, no, that's okay. We already know what your GPA is going to be. So we're bringing you in."
Got you. Gia, what's going on? It's your boy Quan John here reading Motivational Motives. It's a bona fide manuscript. It's a book of real life parables, quintessential quotes, and reasons to reflect. It can be purchased in Amazon, Target, Walmart, Barnes & Nobles, and over 40,000 international mom and pop shops. So get your copy, 100.
And that's how I started. And my friend, she was so happy because she could come out of the contract and go and do what she wanted to do.
Right, right.
And she gave me the actual textbook, which is From Slavery to Freedom, written by John Hope Franklin. And I thought, wait a minute, this is fantastic, because the book starts in Africa. And I said, yes, this is me for sure.
Right, right.
And as time went on and I continued teaching up until I'd say from 2000 and from 2002 to all the way to 2009, I was teaching African American history at Glendale Community College.
Right.
And I taught ethnic studies, which is my minor, at Arizona State University West Campus for 1 year, the principles of ethnic studies. So I'm looking at foreign people, as one would put it, or even our African American heritage from all different angles, be it ethnic studies or just specifically African American history. And a lot of people ask me, why are you so happy it starts in Africa? And I said, simply because that is where my descendants are from.
That's right.
If we're going to teach Italian American history, won't we bring in Italy?
Absolutely.
Okay. So there is no difference for us as Black people. There's no difference. And my students always appreciate the fact that I am teaching some factors of African history. It's such a different factor, and people were looking at African American history seriously, even way back, if you understand what I mean. But it was just a case of pushing it forward so more African Americans could their history.
Right.
Whites knew it, especially when I say whites, I'm talking about the Europeans. They knew our history.
Right.
Especially the British, who actually took over the slave trade, especially by the latter 1600s into the early 1700s. They are the prominent forces behind that slave trade. So they knew our history. They had a lot of our artifacts for a very long time. They had colonized a great number of countries in Africa, even in the 20th century, or let's say the 19th century into the 20th century, we still had African colonial countries. So it was a case that I'm learning it a little bit from my family members, simply because they were from the Caribbean, if you understand what I mean. Being in school in Jamaica, I had to learn it, from that particular angle, but it still does not click until I become an actual professor and actually have to teach it. Now I'm reading a lot of different material, and it all comes into play. So yes, there is a difference. And you have to think of the students in our universities, HBCUs, including other universities, that they had to sort of like protest. We want to know our history. You got to teach us our history. We're tired of learning the British were here. Big deal. I mean, we were here too. So what were we doing? And there were those of us who were here who were not enslaved. And that is the fascinating part of it.
Very interesting point. Because I didn't, maybe we should elaborate more on that. What does that mean? A lot of us were here that weren't enslaved. What do you mean by that?
Well, it's kind of interesting. The first teacher I had for my history course, American history course at ASU, she mentioned that. I thought it was very fascinating.
It is.
And she made a point of saying it twice. And of course, everybody in the classroom kind of looked at her like, what are you talking about? All Black people in America are from a slave background. How could that be? And she said, no, we had people from the Caribbean who were already here in the United States, who had come over under various different factors. We had Africans, obviously, now that we're finding out the truth about what was going on in Africa, we had Africans who had come over on ships through the Caribbean. So when we start to look at the archives and the annals, let's take Christopher Columbus's archives in particular. They always had priests on their ships because they're the ones who were the most educated in the 1400s, in Europe. And when they got to Cuba, let's say Christopher Columbus's first ship, the Pinto, whatever he was on, got to Cuba, they were being told by the Native Americans on the Cuban island that there were Black men already there. And they were on the other side of the island. In other words, the other side of the Havana Bay, they had set up a fort, had built a fort. And it was recorded. It was recorded by the priests or whoever that was with Christopher Columbus at the time. Right. They put those in the Spanish annals. You understand what I mean?
Yeah.
So it takes certain professors who are interested in Black people being in the Caribbean and South America and Central America before the actual triangular slave trade. And this is what they were finding, all of this historical data. So you step back and you say to yourself, well, how could that be? But then when you study the great king, Mansa Musa of Mali, and he's around the 1300s going into the 1400s, he's like the richest man in the world. You can look him up, Mansa Musa at his time. He did so much, not only for his country, Mali, but as his reign continued, he built ships, 200 of them, and they started to go west across the Atlantic Ocean. So you have that particular factor also of this particular African king who wants to know what's going on the other side. Right. By that time, they realize that the world is round, of course. And it's fascinating when you read it, because some of his ships, they get lost. They go down under the sea because they don't know the patterns yet of the crossing over the Atlantic. But some of those ships made it into into Central America, South America. Even probably on our coast, eastern seaboard. That's the factor. Why do we think that African peoples cannot build ships just like anybody else?
Right.
Why do we think that African peoples only sat in their areas and said, we're not really interested. But meantime, you have Africans coming out of North Africa, meaning Morocco and whatnot, going, and they're the Moors actually coming. Right. They go into Europe and they take over southern Spain, parts of France, Italy. So what makes you think that these people, and that's in 800, 850, you understand what I mean? So why do you think that these Africans are not going to do something by 1400s? Right. They were doing everything, just like anybody else.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. That's crazy. You know what's so crazy? It's that it's so unfair that you have to get to college and choose to study this as a major to learn that information.
That's right.
That is so unfair.
Yeah. We teach African American history now, they say, in the lower grades. That's all and well and good. And if you do want to, if they do focus on specific African Americans, you understand what I mean, for young children to sort of absorb what's going on.
Right.
But as you said, Portia, the fact that you have to come into college or university system to actually get the real picture of who these people were, or that they even, and dealt with so much. The African continent is always a continent. And it wasn't necessarily regarding the color of everybody's complexion, because all Africans are not Black in complexion. It was called the dark continent because it was supposed to be the continent that nobody wanted to be bothered with, that nobody explored, which is a lie. Because when you read Roman history, when you read Greek history, those jokers were in Egypt, if you understand what I mean.
Right.
Yeah, they were writing about Africa even during the ancient times. So let's get this straight. Prince Henry the Navigator coming out of Portugal. It's not even the fact that he developed the navigation of the ships and had not even been on a ship himself, okay? But he builds this instrument to help those who are the captains of the ships how to navigate the seas, all right? He is the one that introduces people like Christopher Columbus, who takes more or less a course from that particular factor and is able to discuss with Queen Isabella and Ferdinand of Spain, convince them, build the ships, the new route to India for you.
Right.
Okay, he's learned how to navigate. But literally speaking, even before him, there were people navigating all around the coastal areas of Africa from Europe on their boats, on their ships. So Africans have been dealing with Europeans for a very long time. Very long time.
You mentioned this group of people named the Moors, and I've always I've heard the name thrown out there a lot, but I'm really not privy to their background.
The Black Amours, yeah.
Right. Can you elaborate on who they were and what they mean to Black people?
They're from North Africa, and they're from countries like Morocco, Mali, all of those along that western border, if you get what I mean. And they are the closest to Spain, because there's the Isthmus of Spain between Africa, North Africa, and right. When you look at the map, position of Spain and Africa, it's kind of close, and it is very close. Okay.
Really?
And they have already, I mean, when you think of the African general Hannibal, who's from Tunisia, which is the upper part of North Africa.
Right.
Okay. He was fighting the Romans.
Okay.
And he won. Okay. So you get even further down in history, and then you have the Black Amours, who come out in around 750, and they go into southern Spain. These black men with their Muslim factors, with their, you know, it's not necessarily to conquer anybody, but to spread the knowledge of Islam, to spread the knowledge of science and math, because that's what they were already into. So they're going to Spain, and they're setting up completely in southern Spain, literally take it over.
Right.
And from that era all the way only up until 1492 are the Spanish able to finally kick them off and tell them to go back to Africa. So they're there for a good length of time. And their influence in that part of Europe is fantastic.
Right.
Okay. When you look at Shakespeare's plays, some of his plays, he talks about black generals or black commanders and this and that. And it's because he knew the history of this conquering factor of Africans, North Africans coming into Southern Europe. He understood it, he knew it. So he incorporates it in many ways into Othello is one of the major Shakespearean play that you see this. And it wasn't, it's somewhat made up, but then it's based off of other factors that he has researched, that he knows about, that actually takes place in Italy, in Spain, in France. It's wonderful because they give us the impression that Black people were nothing. They were uneducated, illiterate people running around, not really having any type of cohesion, no type of governments,
none.
And it's all a lie. And that's what I teach in my course, how it is a lie. What were the African kingdoms? What were the African empires? How they dealt with each other, across, you know, lines and whatnot. You know, these countries were not named the names that we know them as now. Okay.
Right.
They were not named Nigeria and Ghana and this, that, and the other. The people automatically knew their boundaries, okay,
Right.
concerning their countries.
It makes me
They
think.
automatically knew their boundaries.
It makes me think of.
Uh-huh.
Well, I guess I was going to say a theory, but it's not really a theory. It's reality. But the Berlin Conference, right? Like the idea that white men from Europe got together and decided among themselves where they were going to take pieces of Africa. Like who was going to have what piece, like just pretty much divide the continent of Africa among themselves. Is that like, I've only read about it, but is that real? Did that really happen?
Yes.
Really?
Yes, it did.